So anyone who believes that Jesus is the Messiah has been birthed by God himself. So let me just reinforce this idea. Jesus, when he talked to Nicodemus, John chapter 3, he said, dude, you have to be born again. No problem. This is the joy of doing it in homes. So fun. So Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, and in the South Bay translation, he says, dude, you have to be born again. Right? And he's like, you think you understand the things of God? You're a teacher of the law? And you don't understand this concept? You have to be born again? And Nicodemus is just so confused, right? He's like, you mean go through like my mom's birth canal again? Like that doesn't make sense. And Jesus is saying, no, spirit gives birth to spirit. And so Nicodemus doesn't get it. Maybe he did later, I'm not sure. But this is a theme in the Bible that you have to be born again in order to understand the things of the Spirit, right? And so another example is Peter's confession in Matthew 16. In Matthew 16:7, Jesus is asking them, or 16, he's saying, who do they say I am, right? And he's polling his disciples, and Peter comes out and says, you're the Messiah. And Jesus says in verse 17, you are favored and privileged, Simeon, son of Jonah, for you didn't discover this on your own. But my Father in heaven has supernaturally revealed it to you. There it is again, right? You can't figure this out with flesh and blood. There's no studying you can do to get to this conclusion. Like, this has to be revealed. Right? Isn't that amazing? My Father in heaven supernaturally revealed it to you. Okay? And then Jesus gives strict orders not to tell anyone else. Isn't that weird? I think Jesus wanted to see who the Father was revealing this to as he taught. He didn't want to, they weren't about going and trying to convince them. He's like, I want to spread my seeds, the words, our seeds, and I want to see who gets awakened by those. I want to see who God touches right then and there. Oh, okay, God just birthed that person. They were just born again, in a sense. And you see there was a progression, I mean, Peter gave up everything to go follow Jesus. That was one thing. Peter was offended. He had a chance to be offended when Jesus said, hey, eat my flesh, drink my blood. That was an opportunity to walk away. I don't understand this guy. It's kind of weird, and he overcame offense. There were so many things that led up to this time where this revelation was revealed, and he was like birthed into the spirit realm, right? And he was able to understand this stuff. So the parable of the sower, Matthew 13, is interesting. It's Jesus, he's sowing seed, and that's his words. As he's preaching, he's sowing seed. And so we take this information like, okay, everyone that believes that Jesus is the Messiah must be birthed by God himself, right? We take that and we go, okay, the conclusion is then, well, like predestination. Then people have no chance to become Christians other than if it's God's choice. That's kind of the conclusion that we come to with just that. But when we get into the parable of the sower, it's a little bit different. We see that he's speaking in parables, and he's saying a farmer sows seed all over, and some falls on this ground, some falls on that ground, some falls on really good soil. And then he explains it to his disciples what this parable means. In Matthew 13:23, he says, as for the seed that fell upon good, rich soil, it represents the hearts of people who hear and fully embrace the message of heaven's kingdom realm. So now we get another piece of the puzzle here. Not only does God have to reveal it, but God is revealing it, and it really depends on the condition of the heart. The heart condition really is the key for that seed to start growing and to grow for a long time, not just a short time, not just a little bit, not just the roots go, shallow, but for that seed, Jesus' words to go out, start growing, leading to this progression of being birthed by God into this other realm that you're like, okay, now I am starting to understand, right? And so it really, a lot of it depends on the condition of our hearts. And so we saw that, Peter, even though he messed up a bunch of times, his heart was pure. He was unoffended. He said, Jesus said, are you guys going to leave too? And he's like, where are we going to go? Like when you speak, we come alive, right? And so there's something that you have that we want. They were hungry and they were humble. And I believe that that is the key to even getting more. When God's seeds are still going out. His word is his seed. His prophetic words are his seeds. When you get a word from someone else, when you hear teaching from someone else, those are seeds. And when our hearts are tender, when our hearts are hungry, those seeds will grow.
Yeah.
But when they're not, they don't. So hunger and humility, they really lead to understanding. And you want more understanding, And that's why I think it was so neat. It's not to put them down, but I want to see, like when I have young people like Anthony and Sarah teach, who's going to really listen to them? Who's going to really go, you know what? God has something for me in this. Or who's going to say, well, they're not that old. What do they have to, what do they know about leadership and relationships? I know more than they do. Or, it's not Pastor Rick or Pastor Joe, speaking, so I'm going to kind of tune out. That's not really a hungry and a humble heart. And so you're really going to, and it's not to condemn, hopefully it challenges you to go, you know what, I'm missing out. Because every single worship set, I can get blasted by God. Doesn't matter who's leading worship. Every single teaching, I can get something from God. If my heart is tender and my heart is hungry. But if it's prideful, if it's hardened, if it's I know more than they do, now you're going to miss out, right?
Yeah.
Revelation 3:15-20. He's talking to the church of Laodicea, and he says, I know that all of you do, and I know that you are neither frozen in apathy nor fervent in passion. How I wish you were either one or the other. So they're lukewarm, and you're like, I'm trying to find out what's their problem here, because I don't want to get into that myself, right? But because you're neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. For you claim, I am rich and getting richer. I don't need a thing. Yet you are clueless that you are miserable, poor, blind, barren, and naked. So I counsel you to purchase gold perfected by fire, so that you can be truly rich. Purchase a white garment to cover you and clothe your shameful out of nakedness. Purchase eye salve to be placed over your eyes so that you can truly see. All those I dearly love, I unmask and train. And so where's the problem where they went wrong here? Because Jesus is rebuking them and saying, no, your condition you're not seeing here. You're poor, you're naked. You need to buy gold refined in fire. Well, you see the issue when he quotes them. He quotes them saying, I am rich. I don't need anything. That's pride. And so where they went wrong is that pride got in, and the hunger and the humility somehow fell to the wayside. And so when you allow pride in, then you're closed off to learning more. And so then you begin to think you have it all, and then when you hear something, it may be so good, it may be like God's trying to speak to you. And I've been there, you guys have probably been there, like, well, I only listen to this certain type of person. We don't say that, but Sometimes it's in our hearts, you know? I'm telling you, God could hide the most life-changing word in someone who you don't look up to.
So true.
And if we're hungry and if we're humble, the revelation will continue to be poured out into us. And that soil of your heart will then become a place where it grows and grows and grows. What's crazy about this verse, we were in a Bible study on Tuesday night, and we're talking about these verses. And I don't know if you guys know Minosha from church, but her parents are in town visiting, and her mom starts speaking, and she just laid out some revelation on us. We're all getting blasted. It was so cool. But her point was, it says that, verse 20 says, "Behold, I'm standing at the door knocking. If your heart is open to hear my voice, and you open the door," and she says, notice with this church, Jesus is outside. And we were like, oh, wow. He's outside. He's not even in. That's what pride does. That's what judgment does. That's what I have it all does. Right? Proverbs 1:7 says, "How then does a man gain the essence of wisdom? We cross the threshold of true knowledge when we live in obedient devotion to God." I love this part. "Stubborn know-it-alls will never stop to do this, for they scorn true wisdom and knowledge." I'm just teaching this because, I want to get more. And I don't want to miss a thing. God's pouring out more and more revelation. And we can, so many times I could just say, oh yeah, I've heard that verse before. Oh yeah, I've kind of heard that teaching in it too now. Oh yeah, this person's not very anointed when they lead worship. So I guess I'll just endure it. But when that's missing out. Well, let's just live in this constant, waterfall of revelation, just hitting our spirits and our hearts, That takes just a humble and a hungry heart, and a heart with good soil, right? So it's supposed to be encouraging. What are the symptoms of pride? Because pride is really our enemy, right? And obviously we all would agree intellectually that pride would be a silly thing when you think of Jesus on the cross. He died and gave us everything. Pride is like, okay, that's kind of silly, right? Because I didn't really do any of this to get where I'm at. But pride can sneak in. And so pride, often, how do you know you have pride? Some symptoms are judgment. When you judge others, that judgment seat should only be occupied by God. I should not be in that seat at all, right? And especially, this is very unfair to your brothers and sisters, to judge the motives. That's just always illegal. When we judge, we have obviously have discernment. We are called to judge prophecies and different things, but we judge the action and we confront based on the action, not on the motives. And so if we're ever to pass judgment, it's more of a love thing to confront, to say, hey, I heard you say this, what did you mean by that? Or, hey, listen, your language sounds like you were doing this. That's a good way to confront. Because I don't think you meant it that way, but the language you used was very offensive, right? But if you're talking to someone else and say, yeah, I know they were doing this. Yeah, I know they meant it this way. Yeah, I know this is why they did it. That's unfair. It's unfair to judge someone's motives. You don't know. There's so many times I've been wrong when I've had thoughts about people, right? Oh, they just are stuck up, or oh, they just are this or that. And it turns out they were scared or they were, afraid or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think it's important too because with judgment, sometimes the way we view life or things is different than someone else because they have a completely different backstory than us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They come from a completely different perspective. So the way we view things is so different than sometimes our other fellow believers view things. But it's not because one's necessarily right or wrong. It's just because we've grown up differently. We've been taught differently. We've been in a different environment. So I think it's really good to have communication so that you can figure things out because like you were saying, I think a lot of times we judge and we're completely off of what the person really meant,
Yeah.
So.
It's good. And we want to learn. We can learn from everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
We've had our kids give us, even when they were little, give us things that they thought God was saying, prophetic words. And they were good. Good. I mean, they hear stuff. God can speak through anybody, right? And this applies even to in the political realm. It's so nasty right now, but I try not to judge the motives of, our leaders. And that can be hard when you're upset, when things just seem unjust, but we just pray for them. I think about, our governor. A lot of people think that he's persecuting the church, and I don't know, maybe he is, but I know God has a plan for those who persecute the church. He turns Sauls into Pauls.
Yeah.
That's his plan, And so we want to pray that guy just gets wrecked by the love of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know him. So it's really hard for me to pass judgment. I don't like his decisions. That's where we can say, we can fight and we can do things. But to judge his motives, I think would be putting yourself in a place of maybe pride, of maybe where the enemy can grab a foothold in your heart, maybe where your heart gets hardened. And it doesn't get hardened in only one area. When your heart gets hardened, you can't pick and choose. Your heart doesn't get hardened to just one person but not another, or to just people and not to God. It just gets hardened, And so the Pharisees, their hearts were so hard, but they knew the word of God, but they missed Jesus, right? And so that could lead to a hardened heart. And so I say that because I don't want my heart to be hard. I want it to be open and soft and pliable to the Lord, right? And so we have to be that way towards everybody. It doesn't work to just be hard over here but soft over here. Your heart is either hard or soft, right?
Yeah. I know that happened recently with us. There was an issue kind of that's been in the news, and Joe and I didn't see eye to eye on it. And we just, we had differing viewpoints on it. And then when I realized when I would just talk with other believers, everyone had Joe's view, not the view I was taking. And so I was like, okay, Lord, I really want it. I could have taken the road of like, I just want to be right. I think the way I'm thinking is right. But I was like, Lord, if there's something I'm not seeing in this area, I want to be open to it. You know what I mean? So I just kept asking the Lord, reveal yourself to me in this. Show me, what's the right or wrong thing in this. And it's funny because it's like he started giving me all this revelation. And it wasn't even so much that he said with that particular issue, one of us was right or wrong. But because I was open, he started giving me all this revelation on peripheral issues that had to do with it. And so I was able to pray into some of those things. But I think that if I would have just been like, no, I'm taking my stance, I know that this is right, that I wouldn't have been open to what he was trying to say. And so I think that sometimes when we take too hard of a stand on, I'm not saying like don't take a hard stand on certain moral issues, of course, but sometimes we still need to be open to listening to other people and to seeing what God wants to say to us, because there's so much more than just that one issue. There's always way more. There's a bigger picture. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Just stay open and listen.
That's really good.
Even in this whole concept of the soft heart and having God, God being the one to reveal things to you, it really plays into evangelism. When sometimes we approach it like this person needs to know the truth, but if their heart is in a place where they're not ready to receive the truth, then we go about it in a different way, right? We want to soften their heart somehow because they're not going to hear it. We want to soften their heart by acts of service or whatever. So we can kind of be strategic based on this. God's got to be the one to reveal it to them. But their heart needs to be in a place to receive it, receive God's word. So it's really important that if someone's not in a place to receive, that we don't just argue with them, but that we go back to our secret place and begin to pray for their hearts. That's very strategic in that, because it's only by being birthed by God himself can people actually know that Jesus is the Messiah. That's the word of God, right? And so it's how we approach that too. I was there just yesterday, Friday I was having lunch, and there was a guy who is at a table kind of over there, and he's like, "What you reading?" And I said, "Oh, this is the #1 bestseller in the universe, the Bible." And he's like, No, that's not true. It's the Quran." And I'm like, "No, I don't think so." He's like, "Oh yeah, it's the Quran. That's the one. It's not the Bible." And he starts arguing with me, this and that. And so I look it up on my phone as he's getting some. He comes back, and he said, "What'd you find?" I said, "Oh, yeah, it's the Bible." And I was right, And so, but he was so like, I could tell it wasn't going to go anywhere. And so I just listened, and I remember hearing the waitress say, "Oh, I have an order for Roger." And he said, "That's me." And so I just went, okay, if I just could get his name, maybe I can just, And so as I was leaving, I said, "Roger, it's good talking to you. I'll see you later." And I think probably he was thinking, how did he even know my name? So you got to start somewhere with people, right?
Yeah.
And so I could have been like, "Oh, dude, you have, give him scriptures, tell him, the Quran's, not the truth." I could have done so many things. And not in one way is right or wrong, but I was just trying to make a connection with his heart. So it just plays into all of that, right? Even with believers. I was having a conversation with someone this week, and it was about the drugs with the COVID and all that stuff, and it came up. There's this one lady with the frontline doctors who's a total Pentecostal Christian, and they said, "Oh yeah, she was talking about healings and stuff like that, kind of like your church, And he said, "That stuff's not very scientific." This is a believer. That stuff's not very scientific. And I'm thinking, have you read the Bible? It is not scientific at all. God is not scientific. I'm going crazy, But I'm like, I just listened, and I was like, this is not, I could totally throw all my stuff on him to, but, it's okay. It's all right. I was just listening to him, and I didn't make it an argument because I've been studying this stuff this week. I'm like, God's got to reveal stuff to people. It's not all up to me. And so there are times when Jesus just laid it out there, and people did not receive, and he didn't chase them down. He didn't argue with them. We think, Jesus has a predestined plan for your life. Totally. He wants to bless you. He wants you to flourish. He wants you to have true riches, all of that, right? And so, it's predestined, but some people won't receive it. And just like the rich young ruler, he's like, "Hey, sell all you have and follow me." He knew he wanted to bless that guy's life more than he'd ever been blessed and give him true riches. And so the rich young ruler just didn't see it. And he's like, "Oof, I can't do that." And Jesus went away sad because he was so for that guy, And so when we think about these things, what Andrea said, listening, it's really like we want them to be blessed. And so we want to approach this thing in the best way that they will receive it. Does that make sense? So we don't want to just be right, because we can be right and we can lose that person.
Yes.
And so, God, just reveal this to them, Lord. Should be our prayer. and try to just relate to them and to listen to them so their heart finds a connection somewhere. Because if their heart is hardened, that seed is not going to grow, right? You got anything else?
Well, I had a little bit more about just being hungry.
Yeah.
So I think that the way we keep our hearts open is to cultivate that hunger. And the way we want the seed to fall on good soil is to have hunger for Jesus. And so sometimes that can be hard. And so I know for me lately, I've just been, my prayer like all day long is, God, give me more hunger. I want more hunger. I just keep praying it. Every time I think about it, I'm like, create more hunger in me, because there's so many times we just get so busy or so distracted that we don't have that hunger. And so I think one of the ways we stay hungry is just making that our constant prayer. And then another thing the Lord's been showing me is to disengage from distractions. And so obviously we're all distracted, we're all busy, we all have jobs and different things that we have to do, but there's a certain element of what we're spending our time meditating on that really we need to shift focus. And there's this verse that I was getting this week about distraction, and it's 2 Timothy 2:4. And it's really powerful because it says, for every soldier called to active duty must divorce himself from the distractions of this world, so that he may fully satisfy the one who chose him. And so, I mean, to divorce yourself is completely tearing away from those distractions. So I think for all of us, our distractions are different. They're not necessarily the same distractions, but we have to be asking the Lord all the time, what's taking my focus? What am I meditating on? What am I spending my time thinking about or doing that really can be more focused on you? And it's not a condemnation thing. Like, we're all in this process, and I know I'm learning this, and he's showing me the different distractions in my life. But he really wants us, you know, even we're all so busy, but even if just taking that time every day with him really like is a mindset shift, I guess, you know, where we're like, okay, I'm going to focus on you as much as I can, even in these tasks that I'm doing. And then I think another way that we stay hungry is to stay connected with believers that are going to edify us, because there's some believers you can hang out with and they're awesome, but they're not necessarily pointing you to Jesus. And there's some that are like super hungry and they're talking about the Lord and they're sharing about what he's doing, or they're being real with what they're going through. And those are the ones that I think you have to have a healthy amount of time with. I mean, obviously we're called to be with unbelievers and to witness to them and minister, but you have to have that healthy balance of being connected with believers that are like spurring you on. You know what I mean? Those people that you walk away with, like, I feel more encouraged after I hung out with them. You know, I feel like I can conquer the world now. So I think those are different ways that we can just stay hungry and that our hearts can remain just open and ready to receive.
Really good. Yeah. This whole thing, I just want to end with this. This whole revelation that Peter got, Jesus just expounded on that moment. And what he did was he started talking about the church, which is the first time he started talking about the church, all you know, through all those verses, through the Gospels. And because it was a moment when Jesus, you know, he was always looking for what the Father was doing. And so it was a moment that Jesus caught and said, oh my gosh, this person, God just revealed this to them. That now this is the church, you know? Now I have the church. Now I can start talking about the church because now I have people that have been given the revelation. And when people have been given the revelation, now they've been birthed by God, and Jesus is like, oh, you're the church. I recognize in this moment, you're the church. And what you're going to do is incredible, right? And he says, Matthew 16:18, and this truth of who I am will be the bedrock foundation on which I will build my church. So this revelation is actually the foundation of the church. It's not a building. It's not a home group. It's not praise and worship. It's not whatever you think it is. It's the revelation that Jesus is the Messiah. That is the foundation of what the church is built on. And so Jesus recognized when they got the revelation, oh my gosh, now I have a church that's just been birthed. And so then he began to talk to them about what the church is. My legislative assembly. You see that when they wrote the King James version, King James, he wanted it to be like a building because he wanted to be able to control the church from the government. But it never was supposed to be called that the church, like a building. It was supposed to be my legislative assembly, my group of governing people. That is what the church is more supposed to look like, right? And he says, and the power of death will not be able to overpower it. Other versions say, the gates of Hades will not prevail. So gates don't charge. So basically the church, the governing assembly of believers, is going to raid the kingdom of darkness, and they won't be able to defend against us, right? And I will give you the keys of heaven's kingdom realm to forbid on earth that which is forbidden in heaven, and to release on earth that which is released in heaven. And so that we're going to get into next week about what exactly do we have authority over to release and to bind, right? It's a really cool topic. But that whole idea of this revelation of Jesus, that is the foundation of the church. And so you can, as you're witnessing to people, as you're talking to people, if someone gets that, oh my gosh, Jesus is really the Son of God, the King of Kings. You're like, oh, you're in, like you've just been birthed, you know, you can get excited about that. And this is that revelation actually just is the evidence that people have been born again, you know? And so when we want to, that isn't the end of revelation. Just like the believer I was talking about this week, you know, he's got more revelation that he could be blessed with, but he's closed off. So there's believing believers and unbelieving believers, you know? Like, so we want to be continually be open and growing in more revelation, and that just takes being hungry and humble in our hearts. It's not be given over to judgment, to pride, not allowing that thing to harden our hearts, so that we can just continue to glean from God's word, and it can, this just can remain alive and living. Prophetic words, teaching, worship, you could just glean from God in every single, you know, environment when you keep your heart like that, you know.